Mike Duggan says there will be no fourth term, but he remains mum on what's next for him. Today, a conversation with the Detroit mayor on why now is the time and what he wants to do in his final year in office. Today is Sunday, November 17th, 2024, and this is Flashpoint.
All right, welcome to Flashpoint. Last Sunday morning, we talked about what we expected would be coming on Wednesday, and we got about half of it. As expected, Mayor Mike Duggan announced that he will not be running for re-election. He'll call it good after 3 terms in the mayor's office. What was left unsaid was what he will be doing next. It would be quite the surprise if he doesn't announce a run for the governor's office, but he said he'll leave that for another day. In the meantime, he leaves us with a lot to discuss. His tenure was one of the more dramatic in modern Detroit history, from a historic bankruptcy to, at long last, seeing population growth in a city that last saw it in 1957. Those who long ago gave up on Detroit had to be stunned to see our city on the list of Money Magazine's 50 best places to live this year. And yet, no doubt, many challenges remain, which will make some uneasy at the prospect of Mike Duggan moving on. Coming up this morning, my conversation with the mayor about why now was the time and about his focus for 2025 before his departure. And our roundtable will talk about legacy and succession, all today on Flashpoint. All right, so last week we learned from Mike Duggan that 12 years will have been enough in the Detroit mayor's office for him. He made that announcement. He still has a year to go, but let's talk about looking back, but let's also talk about what's ahead for these next 12 months. Mayor Mike Duggan, my guest this morning. Good to have you back on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with your announcement. It was interesting that you announced what you're not going to do, but you didn't announce what you are going to do. It was funny that ML Elric kind of took you to task, thinking you were double dipping a little bit, because reporters were there for this and they'll be back when you announce what you're going to do next.
So I had a day to talk to the city employees. Those 9,000 employees who have been with us from bankruptcy and pay cuts and pension cuts and health care cuts. And I felt like I owed it to the employees to thank them for what they've done and let them know about the plans for the city, and to give candidates for mayor a full year to go out and get known. So that's the reason I did it. I think you saw from the size of the crowd that the employees understood that I was talking to them. And I understand media people want me to say what they want me to say, but yesterday was a day about employees.
Yeah, I hear you. It was interesting. When you first ran for mayor, you said that you wanted to be judged by whether or not the city's population was growing. I think it took you longer to get to there than you wanted. I think you also dispute whether or not the census is right. But does that boil down to really why you think this is a good time to move
You know,
on?
I would not have left until I made that. That was the goal, because I really think that's the ultimate test. And the fact that we started winning court rulings, so the Census Bureau had to start counting people, I have no doubt we were gaining 2 years earlier. But until it's officially announced by the Census Bureau, nobody really knows. So I felt like that was a piece. But, you know, we were talking last night, and there was a point at which I was negotiating with the Pistons to come back to Detroit. I thought that would bring all concerts, all sports entertainment downtown. If we could just do that, that'd be the biggest deal ever. Then in a matter of months, I'm with Sergio Marchionne, and we're talking about a Chrysler Jeep assembly plant. And then I got Bill Ford and Matt Maroon, and we're talking about a train station. And it was like we went from, if we could just get this one done, it would be huge for the city. And at the end of the day, and I said this to the team, you know, remember when Mary Barra announced she was closing the Detroit Hamtramck plant? And now there's 4,500 people working there because we convinced them to move the electric vehicles in. And I took the time for a lot of staff to say, you know, you worked around the clock on deals. Each one of these we thought was huge. And you put them all together, it took all of it to change the trajectory of the city.
You know all of this stuff better than anybody else, and yet I also think that it can be difficult to be in the middle of it and really have a sense of what it all means together. Do you think you've got a pretty fair sense of your own of what these 11 years have been?
You know, one of the funniest
or is legacy going to be written by others?
Yeah, one of the funniest was I got a phone call from Kwame Kilpatrick the week he got out of prison. And he says, I'm driving around Detroit. When did all this happen? And so a guy who had been gone for 8 years who knew the city well, actually, that's what hit me, was he couldn't believe the transformation. But yeah, every Saturday or Sunday morning I drive the neighborhoods, and to see neighborhoods that were forgotten, where people are working on fixing up their houses. It's not the city doing it now.
Yeah.
The property values have come back. The parks are back. People want to be there. It is powerful to drive down those streets, remember what they looked like 8, 10 years ago.
What have been your biggest frustrations? I know the land bank, you feel like you got way out in front and moved far too quickly and got in all kinds of trouble with the land bank. But what's been your biggest frustration that still exists today with a year to go?
You know, I would say the thing that I'm not as happy with myself as I should be is the Detroit Promise. We now have $9 million a year. I took 10 years ago and passed something that says we'll take a little bit of the growth in the tax revenues and provide scholarships to high school students from Detroit. Well, of course, property values exploded, and that few $100,000 is now $9 million a year. This week, I was with a high school group saying, how many of you know about the Detroit Promise? And a quarter of the kids, even despite the ads, didn't know.
Yeah.
We're not doing a good enough job of getting to parents and kids and saying, 10 years old, 12 years old, your college is guaranteed for you. 2 years or 4 years, it is guaranteed for you if you live in Detroit and graduate from Detroit High School because you're in the city. And I think that could shape decision-making on the part of kids, on the part of families, even on the part of where to live. And I think if I'm going to fix something in the next year, I am going to make sure everybody understands. As Kalamazoo does. You know, every kid in Kalamazoo knows they're going to college because of Kalamazoo Promise. The Detroit Promise is every bit as good, and we need to get that better known.
In fact, you've talked about our biggest export, unfortunately, has been our young people, which is a terrible thing.
It is. Yeah. It doesn't matter where I go, and you know, and I've recruited for our summer interns at the HBCUs around the country, and to have a kid at Morehouse or at Spelman say, my goal growing up in Detroit was to study hard to get out. I think we're changing that now. But this whole state's main export is our young people.
You worked really hard to fight to change no fault. And we are no longer the state with the highest priced insurance. We're now 49th.
Right.
Why hasn't it worked better?
So,
and what else can we do about it?
So what I did on no fault was take out the ridiculous double payments on the PIP. People on Medicare were paying $1,000 a year for health insurance on their car insurance when they already had Medicare. We got that opt-out. And people who have insurance through their employer, we got that opt-out. And that was a major step in the right direction. It was a big part of the discrepancy between the city and the suburbs. There are a lot more things that could be done. But
clearly, because we're still ridiculously expensive.
We're still high. But I accomplished what I wanted in getting basically a $1,000 cut to the people who were double paying on the PIP insurance. And that was statewide. But it hit Detroiters especially hard.
You are announcing your departure right as we were watching a change at the police department. James White, I think by almost all accounts, has had quite a run here as police chief. Crime has been down, especially over the last, going back to last summer. But talk to me a little bit about what you feel like where we are on safety in the city and now transitioning to somebody else in the department.
If you're building a strong team, you have somebody ready to go. And Todd Bettison was James White's #2 for 6 months, and I took him as deputy mayor, where he's been straightening out the fire department, the bus system, et cetera, and has really become very good at detailed administration. But when Chief White came to me and said, my dream is to run the mental health agency, I said, you have my full support. And we had somebody ready to go, and I think Chief Bettison is going to do extremely well, and he's got the metrics up on the board every week at Cabinet, and he knows his job is homicide rate and shooting rate better be below Chief White's record.
It's funny that you would say when you're running a good team you have somebody ready to go, and now here you are leaving, and I'm not sure I feel like you have sort of shaped a successor. I think you feel confident. You said the other day you feel confident in what's there, but you know, talk about the succession.
I don't think the voters of Detroit want the mayor to pick their successors. They want to pick their own leader. So I never thought it was my job. Coleman Young wasn't able to pick a successor. Dennis Archer wasn't able to pick a successor. I never.
Well, Dennis Archer caught everybody off guard when he left.
Right, but I never for a second thought I am going to pick the person that's going to replace me. What I did want to do is have enough progress in the city that there would be a lot of talent develop and there'd be a lot of choices, and the next mayor doesn't come in with 47,000 abandoned houses, they come in with 3,000. That's a whole different world. The next mayor doesn't come in with massive deficits, comes with $500 million in reserves and a strong financial position. And we do have, I think, several strong candidates, and I think the public needs the opportunity to get to know them over the next year. But I think the city's going to be just fine.
Can you see yourself in a position of eventually endorsing a candidate?
Maybe. Maybe at this point I haven't decided who I'm voting for.
Okay.
So, but it's the way it should be at this point. I'm not sure all the candidates are in yet, but we're going to watch the candidates develop. I do think you're going to see candidates run campaigns to unite the city. I don't think you're going to see the divisive us versus them that Detroiters
We've
knew
seen that
for many years.
Yep.
And I think somebody who unites the city and who has the courage to tell people the truth is going to do fine.
Lastly, you pointed to some of the big exciting things that are happening right now, obviously, but we also have some enormous challenges trying to figure out I-375, trying to figure out what's going to happen with the Rensen. Give me your priority or priorities really quickly for you.
Well,
these
I think
next 12 months.
I-375, MDOT has got a design, it's going to move forward, and everything else is noise. The question is, what do you do? We are going to create a block almost a half a mile long of new downtown. It'll be some of the most valuable real estate anywhere in America. And our planning department is working now. It'll be on the Lafayette Park side. So I'm assuming we're going to see apartments and mixed use. But that's a process we're going to go through. And then there needs to be a conversation for people who were pushed out without compensation, the renters primarily, in the 50s and 60s. And is there a way that those renters who were never compensated should get some? Those are conversations we're going to have. But I think we're going to see 375 move forward just fine.
Good deal. You don't want to announce for governor right now because I'm leaving. I know. I'd hate to miss that.
Well, I was waiting to see what your next announcement was. So I don't want to be running against you.
Fair. I think there's very little. I think you're okay. You'll be all right. Mayor, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being here.
Right.
We'll bring our roundtable in right after this. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. All right, let's talk more about the Duggan era. Joining me at the roundtable today, Adolph Mongo with us, the host of Detroit in Black and White, the podcast. Portia Roberson, of course, is the CEO of Focus Hope. Sheila Cockrell is founder and CEO of Crossroads Consulting and, of course, longtime member of the Detroit City Council. And apparently Guy Gordon's card key still works at Channel 4, host of JR Morning on WJR. Guy, it's good to have you back in the studio. Portia, you at Focus Hope, you are right there on the front lines of everything that comes and goes in the city. So I want to start with you, and I'm going to let each of you kind of assess. Now, I know, as I said to him, he's got a year to go. Right. We'll be doing this again 12 months from now. But tell me a little bit, thumbnail for me, the Mike Duggan era.
Oh, my gosh. Massive development that we had not seen in years. A concentrated effort on reducing crime, which I was a part of when I worked for him at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And I just think that people obviously were ready for trying something new. First white mayor in a really long time. Not many people thought it could be done, but it was. And
on a write-in campaign.
On a write-in campaign. And I think what you've seen is somebody who has stayed committed to the work of being mayor of the city of Detroit. I think he's going to leave a strong, hopefully a strong budgetary scenario for the next mayor. So I think overall he's going to be graded really high on his terms as mayor.
How about it, Sheila?
Yeah, and I would add to Portia's list his ability to stabilize the city's finances. That's the infrastructure, the underpinning of all of the things he was able to do, was to actually come in bankruptcy and not only take the city out of bankruptcy, but stabilize and set in place a financial infrastructure that the right team with the next mayor can keep going. If we don't get the right team, we got a serious problem.
But is it possible that any mayor, no mayor could have succeeded if bankruptcy hadn't happened? We had to clear the decks, didn't we?
Yes, and I'm not quibbling about that. I mean, I was one of the people on council who saw it coming and was like,
I remember.
My colleagues didn't want me to use the B word at the council table.
Right.
And my thing was, we either face it or we're going to fail.
Yeah. Adolph, give me your thoughts on what
He was in the right place at the right time, but the bills are due, and the next mayor gonna have to pay. And you know what? We done had. I was here, and you was here, when there was nothing downtown. There was nothing in the neighborhoods. I came back here, and I was gone. I went to college, gone for 10 years, come back and say, what happened to the retail? What happened to Hudson's? What happened to all these places? And I stayed downtown, and I saw the development, and I feel good. But at what price do we have to pay? We're going to have to, sooner or later, we're going to have to pay the cost. Now, if we don't get someone that's going to come in and make some hard decisions, because we had Coleman Young who fought to keep this place together. And here we have Mike Duggan, who, listen, I have to give him credit. I've not always agreed with the way he done it and how he did it, but we are at this point where he can walk away and say, you know what, I feel good about myself and I feel good about the city.
Candidates don't generally love to run on, we're going to have to make hard decisions. Those austerity candidates, that's tough. But give me your thoughts.
To Adolph's point about paying the bills, we're in a better position now to face the tough choices than we ever have been because he's instituted a culture. We talk a lot with the Lions about that.
Yep.
He's instituted a culture of can do, must do, and best practices. He gets stuff done. That has been, I would take the Duggan era back to his days with Ed McNamara. We've got a Class A airport. We got 2 stadiums downtown. His fingerprints are on those, too, but he wasn't as public. So he is a once-in-a-generation leader. My only question is, to your point, what's the shelf life of that culture?
Yeah.
Is it a bottle of milk?
Right.
Or are these changes that are structural that will maintain? Do we have the leadership that will continue in that culture?
We need shelf-stable milk.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I think we should point out that there is a fund of $500 million that's been set aside to help keep the city stable. So I mean, it is not like somebody's going to come in and have to start from scratch. The question's going to be, and the Detroiters are going to have to follow who the candidates are and figure out who's the person who best represents your ideas and who can best keep this city afloat. It is fragile. The city's economy is fragile. It's going to be for a very long time, but it can be done.
Yeah.
Duggan proved it.
But you know, if we had mayors that came in here after Coleman Young and they, they hired more folks and the budget went out of control, et cetera, you know.
Yeah, but it basically comes from disinvestment over time in the city of Detroit. Wealth left Detroit and primarily went to Oakland County. The bill came due on that in the era after Coleman.
But the bill
But they
is
filled
going to come
gaps
due
by
right
raising
now.
the millage, and it got to be this vicious cycle of where you weren't getting what you were paying for.
You had $1 billion bond at the school board. Yeah.
We also have a very different dynamic with the Mayor Duggan era in the relationship between the mayor and the council. That's been very different than what we had a couple of times before, as you well know, right?
I love it. Wait a minute. Listen, I disagree. Listen. When she was on council,
It was a lot of fun to watch.
listen,
It was always fun.
they
We spent a lot
held
of
the
time out here.
mayors, not 1, but 2, but 3, under the fire. This council, I don't know.
Oh, you're thinking,
you know what?
that's why the
I don't
relationship is that way. Do you
I
think-
don't know.
Rubber stamp, is
I
that
don't
what you're
know.
suggesting?
Every council finds its own approach and
Fair.
takes its own time. And
You remember when he had somebody actually assigned to the council? Because not always because there was relevant stuff happening, just because it was so doggone interesting.
Because you
don't
have to
that
have, no, you
anymore.
have to have a council liaison.
I remember the Jack Kellys and the Dave Eberhards and the Clyde Cleveland.
Let me move. We're going to run out of time. I want to move to what's next. Portia, you and I have spent so much time over the years talking about how Detroit leaders don't always do a great job of helping carve that next generation, you know, the succession pattern. What do you see out there right now? And in fact, your name was in the paper, I believe.
Yes. Listen,
You're not interested, are you? Or do you want to announce something
I
here?
don't have anything to announce today. I think there are a number of candidates from the next generation or people who could be considered for that are the people that you want to see move into those positions, right? I think they're smart people. I think they get it on a lot of levels. And I think they come from a dynamic where they are interested in working together and not necessarily creating an acrimonious environment right away. I think it still holds true, though, that a lot of folks don't want to move out of their positions, and so I think this transition is going to be an opportunity to see what happens when a generation above us, so to speak, moves out and somebody new starts to move in.
Sheila, what do you see as the most likely people to rise to this?
I think the names that are out here are all names that should be given serious consideration. We'll see. I don't think the field is full
Mary
yet.
Sheffield, Santil Jenkins,
Right. Fred Durhall. I mean, is Coleman Young Jr. going to get in? Is Dennis Archer Jr. going to come in? Is Joe Tate going to get in? I mean, there's so many possibilities. Garland Gilchrist. Hell, Shri Tanadar. You just.
I haven't heard that one kicked around
No. I mean,
yet.
I'm just saying that there's all kinds of people. This is an open shot.
Sure.
That folks get. Although we should remember with city council, anybody who runs for mayor cannot run for their seat. So depending on how many people run, it's going to create an entirely different dynamic.
Shuffles
at council.
everything. I know a lot of people are very nervous about Duggan not being mayor, and so that puts a lot of pressure on this next.
Well, for that reason, no matter who you get, they're not Mike Duggan. He's beyond the Swiss Army knife. You don't have anybody with the skill set that he has. So you're going to have deficiency. The question is, can they recruit the people to fill those gaps?
I don't share I think Duggan has done a phenomenal job, but I wouldn't want to sell everybody else in Detroit short and say there's nobody in Detroit.
Show me a resume like his.
Listen, I'm just telling you, you need to know more about more Detroiters.
Y'all gonna be
situation
surprised.
like that.
There's a dark horse out there.
Right.
Somebody's gonna come up here and they're gonna surprise everybody. Mike Duggan.
You got one for us?
No, I won't say, but I do have.
That's why I invite you.
But I do like these women that's out there. It's time for a woman to take control of the city, whether it's Portia Robertson,
I was going to say, she's not even kicking you out of the table.
whether it's Santil Jenkins or Mary Sheffield. Listen, we gotta make a different turn, and women has always been in the leadership in this city.
Portia, ponder that for a second. I'm going to take a commercial break. Back with more in just a minute. I'll give you the last word when we come back. I got 13 seconds, Portia. What you got?
Well, they say Detroit's future is female, so we'll see.
Wait a minute.
Who's they?
There's a billboard.
We need another hour. Meet the Press is next.